Hello, welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness. I am Cherie Burton, and this is a podcast for women who long to feel, express, and be who they truly are. Today we have got Caroline Crockett Brock, and I will explain her background in just a minute. I wanted to remind you that I'm coming up on my 100th episode, and I'm so excited. I mean, this is episode 94, so in the next 6 weeks, I'm doing some giveaways. I've mentioned this in the last couple episodes, but if you would be so kind as to leave a review for me in iTunes and just shoot me an email, cherie@cherieburton.com. You can screenshot the review if you want. You don't have to, but just let me know, hey, I left a review for you, and I will send you a free feminine embodiment or feminine power meditation. It's just a couple-minute guided meditation I created that a lot of ladies have loved. So that is on the table for you if you would help me to spread the word about this podcast, especially as we're coming up in a new era and I'm doing some fun changes as we move forward. Caroline Crockett Brock. She is a writer and a poet. She's currently starting her second book and has been playing in the social media space, has a significant following on Facebook after one of her posts went viral, and that landed her on some really notable national media outlets. So what's interesting about her also is that she got involved in a modality called sand tray, which is a powerful tool that helps you develop some connections between the conscious and subconscious, where she likes to play. I like to play there too. That's probably why we get along so well. But she actually has a studio overlooking the ocean called her Dreaming Room. And this is where she practices sand tray therapy with groups of women or an individual and one-on-one sessions. I think you'll really love this episode because we got pretty deep on exploring the yin and the yang in daily life. Caroline, hi.
Hello.
I'm so glad that we connected. I have Melanie, our mutual friend, to thank for just kind of sending me this text and saying, you have got to interview Caroline on your podcast. You guys are like the same person and you're teaching very similar things. So I always love hearing that. And of course, I went to your Facebook page and also your personal page, because I believe we're personal friends. And I was like, wow, yeah, this is a soul sister. Like she's awake, like she gets it. So can you just share with our listeners sort of your own little story arc that got you into the space of this passion that you now have for sort of helping to be a way shower?
It's a good way to frame it. You know, I think right now, this year has been really interesting for me because I'm a pretty private person. I'm really, I'm a housewife. I've got 4 kids. I do what I want. I'm a sand tray practitioner, as you've said, which is really what I love. I bring people into my studio and I get to see and help them see themselves and their souls differently, which is such a beautiful thing to experience. But I've also spent the majority of my life since I was 12 on a spiritual quest that has taken me, in so many different directions. And I've come to a really wonderful place this year, actually, where I've stopped seeking really anything. I know there was like a time where I was, I grew up LDS and I matriculated through that organization with all the bells and whistles, I was a Relief Society president, which is a women's organization, multiple times, and Young Women's president, and I was actually I'd had all these beautiful experiences with spirits from other dimensions and visions, and I was definitely going along a path of deep seeking, and within my own faith tradition, if that makes sense. And it was beautiful, and I loved it, and the experiences that I had were just leading me further into that tradition. And I mean, at one point I was getting up at 4 a.m. for a year and a half in order to write a workbook / book for women on the temple while teaching, at the religion at the university. And so I was really comfortable and confident in the way I was expressing my own spiritual path. And I was actually getting a lot of emotional addictions met because I love to see patterns and think of things in equations, and all of the mental gymnastics and all the doctrine and the scriptural analysis and the way I presented that to other people. It was beautiful, and it got me a lot of praise. And who doesn't want that, really, Mm-hmm. And I came to a point where I started searching further and further, and the journey took me further and further from my faith tradition. And that became, I had some moments of really some moments that took all of my courage and all of my the strength in my soul to keep going, because I knew that the odds were getting stronger, that I was going to have to leave the faith tradition that I really loved. And and what happened, looking back, I think one of the things I want to talk about today is framing a little bit of my own story within this bigger context of yin and yang.
Yeah.
Because the yin and yang framework is very helpful in this day and age. It's helpful when we can analyze our societies in yin and yang. It's helpful when we can analyze our energy flow within ourselves that way, and within our marriages or our children. And I wish that someone had actually explained this to me when I was in the beginning phases of my journey, because it's really not very well fleshed out in our Western culture.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, I'd like to just talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, because I know it very much ties into your personal story of how you were on a certain track that you thought was spiritual, and and there were many parts that were leading me in a certain direction, and I've stopped judging things as good or bad. They might be, right. Immature or less effective. And that's something I realized when I was writing a book on the temple, is that I started to really look at the equations of progression and the laws and all the things that presented there, and started to work through the equations and recognize that they weren't getting me what they said they were going to get me. And so, going back to the yin and yang, I think, so the yin and yang was developed in China, in ancient China, in like 300 BC by something called the School of Naturalists, which then later the Taoists came, they adopted that. Okay, so in Taoism, or the Tao basically means the way, or the way to be. So it's just a way of explaining the way energy flows. So what these men and women in this school of naturalism wanted to do was to study the way the energy flows within the universe, from the smallest cell to the way our solar system operates, so that they could step into that energy system with more harmony and help humanity. And which is an interesting thing, because I read that in 300 BC, and then I look to the way our Western scientists look at studying energy, and it's usually about extracting things from the environment, or mining things from the environment, or, I think it's sad to see that we're living in the consequences of downstream of the Industrial Revolution, and how out of harmony and out of balance our personal lives, our collective lives, and just the way we step into this collective energetic dance, how out of harmony the steps are. If that makes sense. Oh, absolutely.
So going back to my story, the yang energy is the masculine energy. So, and everyone has yin and yang in them at different, in different kind of points. So I would say that I'm a little bit more yang than a lot of women are. And so everyone has kind of a different set of yin and yang within them. But when people say yin and yang, it means, or yin and yang, it means masculine or feminine, or a lot of times male or female. So I think it's profitable to recognize that most Western religions were developed by men. And men seem to, their energy is an up and out energy. So if you think about it in terms of like an ejaculation, the ejaculation is an energy that goes up and out. and the female's orgasm is something that goes kind of down and around, or down and in. So you can see the yin and yang expressed in everything in nature, everything. So, the sun is the yang and the yin is the moon. The roots of the tree and the things that you don't see are yin. All of that the stuff that happens in the dark and that supports all of this ascension-based energy, it's happening in a yin space. And so you can see in our culture, things that happen, let's say in utero. How much does our culture value pregnant women and what they're eating or what they're learning or what they know about being pregnant, or about what do we teach about prenatal care or the importance of the first 8 years of life, what goes on inside the home? How much is that valued, supported, recognized as the seed of the future of the success of our people? Everything that is yin is suppressed. So the male energy likes to create an outer structure. So they create outer structures. They're really good at that. But when yang is left unchecked, it builds all of the structure, but doesn't allow the yin to dance and enliven the inner structure. So you see this happening in all over our society. You see this happening in the healthcare system, in the school system, in every single aspect of our society, in politics, in everything, in the way our soil is being depleted, and in our food systems. Everything has too much wounded yang energy, and it's not checked by the yin energy. So when I was going through and matriculating through this religion that was very masculine based, I kept going up this ladder or this scaffolding that was created that I thought was getting me to God, right? Mm-hmm. Because and this happens in every religion. I'm not saying it happens everywhere. That you look at male priests and how they value going up and out to God and getting out of their natural bodies and getting out of this human condition. And they looked at what women were doing and recognized that, 100, 200 years ago, back through all of civilization, women were involved primarily with the messiness of life. They were breastfeeding and menstruating and cooking around fires, and they were involved in gathering food and midwifing babies and having sex. All of these things were very earthy, right? And so what all these religions did is they kind of suppressed all this beautiful potentiality and all of those earthly down and around activities. And they only valued the up and out energy to God.
Yeah. And
so we have this equation that is so skewed. And me personally, I was living in that equation. And I went to the end of that equation, and God brought me straight back down to the earth, came crashing back down to the earth. Mm-hmm. Through this experience, I actually happened upon a book written by, I think, some early Christian monks, where they said the book was all about learning how to pray with your heart, with no words. And so now looking back on this, I realize, this is what Joe Dispenza is talking about when he talks about, right now we're seeing all this research coming out that shows that the energy of your heart, is 1,000 times the energy of your mind, and that the electromagnetic energy of your heart is, it's projecting 3 to 8 feet out from you. It's the most powerful electromagnetic force. And when we can cultivate certain feelings and project them upwards, we can change our brainwaves. Mm. And so what I didn't know was that I was doing that. By doing this prayer, where for 6 months to a year, I just prayed with emotion instead of words. I stopped using words. So it was this beautiful, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just feeling my way into it. And suddenly I had this experience where the love of God came upon me and changed everything. Made all of those experiences in the yang-based world with other spirits look like child's play based in comparison to what happened to my soul. And that was really the moment.
Like a singular event, or was it just a process where, can you trace it back to like an actual
Yeah, so it was a singular event in my journey where I had risen so far up that I thought that all of these other experiences that I was having, these other experiences with people in other dimensions, really, once I started praying that prayer and I started doing that, I had a singular prayer one night. And I was all alone in my house, and I was actually just generating gratitude up, and suddenly I had this experience where my whole body was filled with love in a way that was so, so different than any other experience I had had previously. And what it did was it changed my soul. It actually transposed the expression of my being into a higher expression of itself. So that when I went back, at the time I was actually writing a book on the temple. So I'd wake up every morning at 4:30 for a year or two and just write. And I went back to the temple to do more research done. And within the first 3 sentences of the voiceover, suddenly the whole ceremony was out of harmony with my soul. And it was at once, it wasn't something that I cognitively came to an understanding. It was something that was deeply out of harmony with who I was suddenly. And it was at once beautifully liberating and terribly devastating because I loved my religion I had based my entire life and my entire identity and all of my future, was circling this beautiful structure. And now it had to come down to the ground. So that was the beginning of my invitation down into my yin, which I went kicking and screaming down into that yin because I was so valued in the yang space.
So just for our listeners who may not be familiar with, so the yin is feminine and the yang or yang is masculine.
Yes.
So you were on this seeming space, teaching, creating, trying to derive meaning from something that your soul intuitively was like, well, let me show you. God show you personally, because there's reading about it and writing about it and hearing teachings of others, and then there's actual direct experience. Yes.
And I was having some direct experiences, but it was all it wasn't it was all a wounded masculine way of interpreting my kind of ascension to God. And in reality, it wasn't about it. I kind of use this analogy sometimes where my soul is kind of like a house, and I was spending all of my time in the cathedral of my soul and the library of my soul, and I wasn't spending time in the closet of my soul or in the basement of my soul, or in recognizing that the things in my basement needed to really be loved upon and seen and embodied. And I needed to go back into the kitchen and learn how to, bless food to wholeness or nurse my baby in this beautiful, glorious, conscious way, where I needed to start to recognize that all of the yin feminine gifts, that I had actually sold them for a mess of pottage. I had sold my inheritance because I didn't recognize, if my inheritance were a plot of land, I didn't recognize there was gold under there. And so I was searching all over the place, far and wide, where all these other men were searching, men and women were searching, when in reality, it was sitting right under my feet. I just had to strip the overburden. I had to start filtering out all this beautiful, delicious gold that had been right there all the time. And it was my gold. It was my way. So what happened to me personally is that what I decided to do was I decided to let go of all the yang inputs. So I stopped reading scriptures. I stopped listening to, anything that was coming inside from the outside. I just stepped back, and I created a hospital-like place in my soul. I really dialed back all the things that I didn't need from the outside. And I started to really look inward in a way, in a really visceral, kind of raw way. I started to, do a lot more quiet things. I'd have ritual baths. I would do a lot of journaling. And I started to get really clear about certain relationships in my life, and recognizing the power of fear in my life to halt my progression, and the power of desire in my life and curiosity to increase the rate of my progression. Because I think,
that's a good delineate. I mean, I once heard that curiosity overrides fear, and we aren't taught in higher learning, religious spaces, and what have you, the process of inquiry. It's like, this is what is the truth. This is what's handed to you. Here's the information. It's never, how do you feel about that? How does that land in your body? Totally. How do you resonate with that? So it just develops this whole group think, and then we lose the ability to go within. So I love what you teach about desire and fear. We were talking about earlier.
Yeah, because I think, and this is what I tell a lot of women who are in this specific place, because a lot of women through the years have come to me because I've been, leading different spaces online and in my practice. And a lot of women are in this space that I was maybe in 10 years ago, where I was brought back down to earth, where maybe I recognize that this isn't working, that this patriarchal religion or the way that they're doing it isn't working for me, but I don't really know where to go from there. If that makes sense. So I the first thing I tell them, in many women don't take my advice, unfortunately, is to start exploring embodiment practices, and to recognize that all of the progression, or most of the progression that you'll make as a soul, comes on the other side of your fear, on the other side of your uncomfortableness. And so when your desire for that next level of expression eclipses your fear, you will step into that next space. And so you can do one of two things. You can either stoke your desire, or you can run straight into your fear and surpass it and move forward. So even just, I was looking back through some of my journals last week, and I was looking at the things I was afraid of, 10 years ago, and it was almost laughable. Like the things that I actually was afraid of. And I'm sure, if spirits from other dimensions looked at the things I'm afraid of now, they'd almost laugh, because so many of our fears aren't really that scary. They're actually just things that if we were to let go of, we could step into a much more whole space as women. We could step into more of our isness. We could step into our self. And the most powerful thing our society could have right now is women who are unafraid to fully embody themselves, to embody every room in their souls. Like if we were to actually, right now, if we were to take a breath and put our hands on our hearts and just do a body scan and say to ourselves, welcome home. Welcome home to your body. What parts of your body are you sucking in right now? Are you holding tight? What parts of yourself are you not allowing yourself to feel? What parts of yourself are constricted? Recognizing how out of body we are right now, and how much there is to know and to love on ourselves if we would but recognize the gold already in ourselves.
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent. I have a Stand, Speak, Shine school, and we literally spend 12 weeks just getting in the body because it's not something we've been entrained. Stay in your mind, stay up. And it bypasses all the lower energy or chakra centers of safety and groundedness and womb wisdom and those kind of things. And so it becomes like literally leaving home. You left home.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just not, it doesn't work to access your wisdom without that groundedness.
And so I bet you have found, like I have, that there's such a beautiful power when women get together in groups and they're able to experiment and explore these things together. Is that something that you experienced?
So I'm a huge yes. I believe in the power of retreats and events, and women learn through community. So we're very relational. So that's why we outsource everything to everyone around us and don't do the self nourishment. But in that relationability, when we get into this group dynamic, there's a lot of, somebody else literally is like a proxy and expressing and something's in their body that the group needs. And I think when we talk about embodiment and soulfulness and groundedness, that's actually a threat to patriarchal structures because they just don't, it's so misunderstood because they don't see it as spiritual.
Exactly. They don't see it as, and so that we don't see it as spiritual. So I know with my own husband watching me go through this process, and, he was a bishop at the time that I left the church. He was released because of me, which was very hard for us. It was very public. And it was the most beautiful thing that I could have done for my personal progression in my soul, because when that wildfire came through, the heat of it and the power of it and the shock of it, the shock of the waves that came through, the extended family and the way people responded, and all of the immature beliefs in love that were triggered, how I got my identity, the definitions of love that my family of origin placed upon me, that, if I was smart, I would be loved. If I was capable, I would be loved. All of those things came crashing down, and I had to face my greatest fear, was that I wasn't worthy of being loved. And that is the most beautiful place to be. I see so many people, so many of these groups online where they go online to get support, and they go online to kind of almost sometimes get out of their fears, instead of actually embodying what it feels like to be so afraid. Like, there were moments where I would lay on the ground and physically shake and cry and feel how afraid I was of not being loved, and then having to release that and stand up and realize that I already am love, and that I am not in a cognitive sense, but in a grounded, deep, soul-based, shifting sense. And you just don't get that in a Facebook group, when everyone's telling you that you're right, and you're in this vacuum where it's, who's right and who's wrong. It's how can we uncouple from immature definitions of love taught to us by wounded, immature humans trying to just do their best? How can we uncouple and ask for higher definitions of love? We can do that by actually physically feeling how really afraid we are of taking that next step. Feeling it in our bodies and releasing it, and asking for more truth.
Yeah, there's a tendency to spiritually bypass over, some of the things that are less comfortable to talk about, or some of our trauma, fears, et cetera. And I feel like, when somebody has the bravery like you to take a step back, whether it's a temporary sabbatical, or I just need space, or it's like, I'm literally breaking, this isn't serving me, I'm breaking out of this.
Breaking bonds, uncoupling.
It will actually trigger a lot of people's subconscious who wish they had that bravery, but they will then project onto you, oh, you horrible person, or like, you're so deceived, or what have you. How did you shore up your reserves to be able to stay in that space and just continue on the path that you were embodied in and that felt aligned for you?
Well, I think for me, I look at every situation that comes into my life as showing me a reflection of things I still need to work on. So curiously, when I released all that fear, I didn't get that attack energetically anymore. Because I actually released that fear that I felt like was attracting those people to feel that they could actually project that at me. It was a really interesting experience, where when I felt that fully and released that and actually healed that wound, or that the belief that false belief, that I needed to accept that from then, or I was afraid of losing. When I became unafraid of losing their esteem, truly unafraid, I actually stopped receiving that level of projection that I was receiving, which was really an interesting, it's like when I changed my equation and I really felt fully how afraid I was to be judged, or how afraid I was to be seen a certain way. And I just kept showing up in the space as me. And I made it okay. It was okay if you don't like me. It's okay if you don't agree with me. It's okay if you believe I was deceived by Satan. That's fine. I'm just going to keep being the best me. And you know what? I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to be wrong. In fact, I want to be proven wrong, because every time I'm proven wrong, I learn how to mature in love. Yeah. And that's my goal. And so there's really no right or wrong. We're just all learning how to love better.
Yeah, all paths are the path. That's,
yeah.
And I love what you're kind of talking about is like that non-attachment, right?
For sure.
It's just like, if I am really attached to the opinions of other people, then all that projection and blame and like that, you could just marinate in it and be a victim. And it's so interesting to me that the people that I respect the most are like revolutionaries. Yeah. And I know you and I have talked before about wilderness prophets. This feels like a good time to bring that up.
Yeah. I think so Cherie and I were talking before this, just that prophets and prophetesses, they don't ever come from the center of the tribal fire. They don't ever come from they're not, I wouldn't say ever, but they typically in scriptures don't come from that space. They come from the wilderness. They have to take their own journey out into the wilderness. And like really literally at one point, I'm not saying I'm a prophetess by any means, nor do I even want to become one, but it how many times, Cherie, have you laid metaphorically in the desert searching for an oasis that you didn't, you were just so thirsty and saying, do I really have to be out here still? Do I really have to continue to travel on this path? And some of the deepest, most beautiful truths I have found in the most barren, what I thought was the most barren wasteland in my soul. Yeah. Truly.
It's almost like when Christ went into the wilderness, and we just have that 40-day gap or whatever. Yeah. Like even Jesus himself did not come from like the establishment or
for sure.
He went to John the Baptist to get baptized, and John the Baptist was a wilderness prophet himself. And they both could have gone to, the priestly class, if you will, to receive that. I feel like that's something that's grossly overlooked.
For sure. And I think one of the things that Christ came to say was that he came to point out this yang-based wounded scaffolding, because the propensity of all religions, including Mormonism, including Catholicism, any religion, name it, what it ends up growing into is a very wounded yang or yang-based. It's almost like this scaffolding that's so tall and it's full of so many. Christ came to say, wait a second, you've got 410 Noahide commandments. You've got all these, hedges around these laws. You've got all this scaffolding and no life in the center. You've lost your heart. You've lost the reason why you do these things. You've lost the love and all the yin energy enlivening the structures. And so the yin and yang it's a beautiful energetic balance that if we were to just step into the harmony of it, our whole world would shift. The potentiality of all of us would shift. If we were to honor the yang and the yin, honor what they bring to the table. So what I'm seeing in the collective space, now with social media and with politics, is that we really have a situation where the yin and the yang, they stop talking to each other. The collective has stopped really talking to each other and recognizing that it's in the back and forth. It's in the dialogue where we find the wholeness that we're looking for. So if you look at republicanism, the wounded parts of it, they skew in a yang-based fashion. So that would mean that they are really concerned with the outer structure. They're concerned with protecting, and they're concerned with all the security. They're concerned
control.
They're really, and that skews into that. The woundedness of that is rigidity and control, and it's kind of an authoritarian type of a way of, like, let's say if you were parents, the male, it would be, he would skew towards being authoritarian without the love. And so then you have the Democrats, and their wounded aspect is they skew towards permissive parenting. They're enabling too much. They're allowing, they're going, so there's too much order The
so
Republicans would skew towards order, and then the yin would skew towards chaos. We need both order and chaos. We need both a structure that works for us, and that structure honoring the way that the yin enlivens what goes inside the structure. And when we can honor both sides, the expression of and the potentiality of what we can experience as humans is going to completely shift. And that's why I think that's what we're being invited to in 2020 is we're being invited down into our yin.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see that the critical examination that's happening within individuals, like we're not taking everything at face value anymore. We're asking the deeper questions. And I love how you drew that parallel too of like the yin, you know, the Democrats are like the wounded mother figure, or like the overly permissive parent. And then the yang is, you know, that father that's just this authoritarian, and they're like divorced.
Yeah. So they're divorced, and we've got the social media and the media profit. They're like the divorce lawyers, and they're profiting off all of this conflict. And meanwhile, we're in the middle, and every 4 years we vacillate between, you know, the father's house who has the most elaborate security system on the block, and yet his children are starving, and his children are suicidal and anxious on the inside, getting a terrible education. And then the next 4 years we go to, you know, the mother's house where anything goes, and everyone's eating cookies at 10 at night, and, you know, going and sneaking out, and who really cares? And so we're so used to bouncing between these two wounded energy forces.
Yeah.
And
like,
year by
really
year, it's getting worse.
It will be like, it's very akin to what we were saying about the wilderness prophet kind of ideology. Like revolutionary people are waking up, like revolutionaries are going to be galvanizing at some point. I mean, right now it's just a lot of people waking up to distortion. And I think COVID was really like, what do we believe? Like, so many conspiracy theories. And then people start attaching to all these causes. And it's like, no, go within. Like,
and that's what
body, figure out your own thing. Yeah.
And that's what I'm seeing definitely even just in on my own Facebook page. So my own Facebook page since the shutdown has gone from maybe 2,000 friends to I think I'm at 18,000 friends within that space. And I started writing on my personal page. I was doing a lot of writing in different groups, but I started just coming out and writing on my personal page the week the quarantine happened. And there has really been a shift in the softening and the collective. There's been a shift. I feel like people are listening differently than they really typically have time for. I feel like part of the yin, so right now we are in this yang based pace, right? This wounded yang, because the yang is almost like a drum, and they're this production based mentality where we've been almost hypnotized by this manic energy that's, you know, we're up at 6 and we're go, and how much money can you make, and get the kids here and take them here, and it's this manic type of energy that we're so consumed with that we don't have time to even wake up to the fact that it's almost like a hypnotic trance, right?
Oh, it's exactly what it is. My cousin and business partner, Kendra, she's a master level neurolinguistic program trainer, whatever. And it's just like where everyone's hypnotized, everyone's asleep. Even sitting in church, it's like droning, it's regurgitated information. We don't question it. Yes. Yeah, so we're all basically hypnotized. So everywhere, not just in church.
Everywhere. And so 2020 has given so many people an opportunity to uncouple from that program, whatever it is. And like recognize, for me, I'm uncoupling every single morning. The first thing I do is drop into my heart. And I'm doing attunements. I'm uncoupling from the societal agreements, because there are so many layers. There's so many layers of what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a woman in your family, what it means to be a woman in your, you know, things that you learned in your religion, you brought into your marriage. I'm uncoupling all the time, as I'm sure you are. Okay. Can I uncouple from the unconscious collective agreement of what it means to live in this society? Because unless I'm willing to uncouple from it and dream or imagineer a new way of stepping back in, then nothing's really going to change. We have to have enough people that are imagineering a new way of being, in living into a new lifestyle. Like Richard Rohr says he's been preaching for 40 years. And he says, words really don't mean anything. How can we live into a new lifestyle? So for me, and this is something I know we talked about previously, is now that I explored all of these yin-based ways of being. So I've taken, it's almost like I had a recipe for chocolate chip cookies, right? Given to me from birth. But I only really had flour, salt, and eggs. And I kept baking these cookies and they weren't turning out, but they were telling me that aren't these cookies good? But my soul really was like, wait, these aren't chocolate chip cookies, right? I started then experimenting with some other ingredients. So I started finding, what's chocolate taste like? How about I find the very best chocolate that feeds me? I need to find some baking soda, and I need to find, some brown sugar. What does brown sugar taste like? So I started all these yin ingredients. And now what I'm able to do is I'm able to combine them in a beautiful fashion that works for me. So one of the things that I do, I'm going to just tell you what I'm currently experiencing and experimenting with, because I think some people listening to this, yes, we can talk about cognitive energetic flows and how to step into that, and unitive consciousness and all these beautiful things. But the other half of that is, okay, so what does that mean to me? How do I start my day? How do I end my day? How do I make sure that I am loving awareness at all times? I'm stepping into a life that feels like it's more and more regenerative, and that I'm moving in my body in a way that feels like I'm a 12-year-old girl, that I'm just, there's nothing I can't do, experience, or explore. So some of the things that I have really found helpful, Yoga Nidra. Yoga Nidra was a beautiful, is a beautiful invitation. And there's so many different practitioners that you can download on YouTube or whatnot. What it seeks to do is balance the yin and yang, so that you learn how to move your consciousness through different parts of your body. You learn how to sit into your womb and really cultivate what does it feel like there. You learn how to move your consciousness onto your left side and your right side, and then hold both spaces, which is balancing. You learn how to go up and out of your body. You learn how to sink down into the earth, and then you learn how to hold the dilation of both. So it's kind of doing the exact same thing as Joe Dispenza is doing in his guided meditations with convergent and divergent meditation, where you're learning to put your consciousness in the very heart of different parts of your body and sit in cells. Then you're learning how to expand your consciousness out into the furthest dilation of space that you can conceive of. And that is a process whereby you're actually changing your brainwaves. So Yoga Nidra, beautiful. You're resting. It's a yin practice. Another one I really, really love is yoga as prayer. And I know that a lot of people don't recognize this, but taking, if you do yoga, start a practice where you do a vinyasa and you start with an intention, and the very beginning of it, where you put your hands in a prayer position, that is your intention. And then what you're doing is, when you do your vinyasa, you are actually praying as a vinyasa. So all of your movements, it's almost like a moving mandala, where you're planting your intention down into your heart. You're moving it up to the earth. You're bringing it down into the ground. You're praying with your whole soul. That is a beautiful movement meditation practice that I've been experimenting with for a few years. Another thing, what do you do?
Well, no, I do something very similar when I'm consistent with it. It's very powerful, but it's easy to get out of that practice. I actually took a 200-hour yoga teacher training with my daughter, and we've been experimenting a little bit with, I remember when I was like uber religious in terms of like wanting to do everything right, like Pharisaical, is like somebody had said to me, to the righteous, their very lives are a prayer. And you had mentioned earlier about, you went through a stage where you just prayed only with your emotions, which I thought that was super powerful. So people can get in their head too much about things like yoga and meditation. They're not really in their body. They're not, and then it sounds like a judgment. I mean, everybody's in their own practice, so I don't want to say it's right or wrong, right? It's just, it's like you're saying, when the movements become devotional, It's a whole other level of a practice. And because for so many years, and maybe you can relate to this, it was like, oh, did I do my scriptures? Check. Did I do my morning prayers? Check. Am I fasting every once a month? Check. Did I go to the temple this week? Check. Like, it just becomes routinized, and you lose the heart of and the soul of what it's meant to bring you to, which is yourself in God within you. Like, we're missing the boat. So anyway, I just had to insert that when you brought up the vinyasa with the as an act of prayer. That's just beautiful.
Yeah. And you're right. I think if you can practice with yoga, and even let's say you go, one of the things I started a long time ago was I would take a yang based class, which is a vinyasa, where you're generating heat, right? Because heat is yang. And then right after that, I would go to a yin class, or yin yoga, which is all about holding, and it's about sitting in static positions for 5 to 10 minutes, but it is about the connective tissue, as you know. So
and it brings up a lot of emotion when you're in those poses. A lot of emotion can be released.
And when you can play around with harnessing the power of, so something I'm doing right now in my life is that I'm trying to harness the best of the yang and the yin. So what I do personally right now is I have this, I work out from home, and I do I just have like an app on my phone. It's like the one I do is like Sweat by Kayla. So it's four 7-minute intervals, right, of high intensity. So you're really generating a lot of heat. You're going 80 to 100% of your max. Every 7 minutes you rest, but instead of the normal rest, what I'm doing is I drop straight to the ground. I sink my soul into that ground. And there's a lot of things I do. I do affirmations. I do faster EFT, where I'm bringing up certain emotions that I'm feeling and I'm tapping them through my body. And then I get up and I do it again. And do you know how many times I have brought up such deep emotions that I wasn't able to access
through the moving of your body?
Yes. In the stoking of the heat. It's like I needed to bring up that heat, and then I needed to sink straight back down and start tapping certain emotions. You know, like let's say I'm doing stuff with my kids. Okay, so I'm tapping through my frustration or my sadness and my kids and their health problems, and I can't control them, and I don't know what to do, and it all just comes out in this beautiful way. And then after I'm done with that 28-minute exercise, I do my yoga as prayer outside, and I'll do this whole moving mandala that's just so great, and I move my body however it wants to be moved. I don't have any set routine. I just allow my body to move itself, because it's in this beautiful space of balance, right?
And I love that. Restore, regenerate, rest, that heat. Yeah. So when you're able to activate the masculine that way, then it's able to soften and open, and then those yin poses and the yang.
Yes. And so you're able to balance these energies out. So if you turn the yin yang symbol on its side, you'll see it's a sine wave. And even the day, that's a wave that goes up and then it goes down. So everything, all the patterns in the universe are really along this wave function. And you'll see that dusk and dawn are periods where it's balanced. The yin and yang are balanced. And so when you can do things to really honor what the yang can bring you and honor what the yin can bring you, and then you're able to, so after I do the yoga as prayer, I'll lay in Shavasana, and I'll put on, Ram Dass and East Forest have a beautiful soundtrack they do on nature or on loving awareness, or I'll be able to really access different states of being and different states of consciousness, because my energy has now become balanced. And I'm just doing that within an hour at home, in a time where, normally people go to the gym and they work out, but it doesn't really do anything for their soul per se. Right. It's just another thing to check off the box. So this doesn't have to be something where you have to go, meditate on the 15 ways you could die for 2 hours a day. It's just something where a woman can wake up, put their hand on their heart, learn to drop into your heart, learn to really lead from the heart, learn to ritualize anything. Ritualizing doing the dishes, ritualizing taking a bath, ritualizing having sex, ritualizing sending your kids off.
Yeah. And that word is a trigger word for a lot of people. What they don't understand is it's devotional self-care, like light a candle, put on some music. And that we get so caught up in the heady routines, kind of what I was saying before, like check, 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 check. And it's like, how do you bring your senses into this moment?
That is really true. And I think a lot of women, they don't and I've been in this place. So I'm telling you, I've been here. They're so out of body that they don't even know what they want.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Very common.
And so what I say to that, and I say even to my children, cultivate your desires. Wake up in the morning and say, what do I want? What do I want to put on? Go in the closet and say, what do I feel like feeling like today? And how can I put on an outfit that makes me feel that way? What do I want to eat? I don't care if it's a bonbon. What do I want to eat? How do I want to go about the day? What do I want to, everything in the day has a potentiality of being just yummy, delicious desires, or it can be duty and drudgery, and it can be the same activities.
Yeah, I think we're programmed to believe that that's more spiritual, the latter.
Yes.
The drudge, the pain, the suffer, the self-flagellation, the compulsion to repent. Not that,
exactly.
We could have a whole thing on repentance, but
I want to share that. And when I want to share that when I went from my yang into my yin, and I really started recognizing how out of body I was actually at 37 very close to death. I had a hemoglobin of 4.5. I was actually running myself straight off a cliff, which is really the pattern of what my mom did. Because in my faith tradition, to live at the edge of my capacity was to be a righteous woman. That was the belief that I have. To serve everyone else before myself was honorable. To run around, serving everybody else, and really honestly living on that cliff edge, I was unconsciously seeing that as more righteous than loving myself as much as I loved other people. Because Christ came to say that the first law of the universe is to love yourself as much as you love your neighbor. And I see most women, they don't recognize that they love their neighbors or their children much more than they love themselves. Mm-hmm. Because I remember going through that health crisis, and one of my friends said, if your own child had this same problem, how quickly would it be solved? Absolutely.
That whole martyr thing, it can get women, and I mean, it's seeming right. Okay. I could go down a whole rabbit hole, but just the whole like self-righteousness, holier than thou turned martyr. It's that unhealthy yin and yang. It's just, how can I, So as we kind of round this out, I would really love for you to kind of, talk about the ascension model, how that can get skewed, because you hear it a lot, even outside of religious structures, like this ability to just bypass everything and ascend. And it's very alluring, and it can be, I think, spiritually addicting for some people. And I didn't understand it, but when you and I started talking about it before, it you and I are on the same page with that. So can you talk about that a little bit? I know you talk about scaffolding to God, but what is the ascension model? How can it go into a healthy masculine real fast?
Well, I think the wounded yang has a propensity to build structure, and they keep building structure, and they keep building structure without giving any honor to what the women do with this down and around energy. And so I think that, and I see this a lot even in male biohacking circles that I'm in, where men want to go straight from a wounded yang, where they've done all these things in the wounded yang, and then they want to take some sort of plant medicine or psychedelic and go straight into a unitive consciousness place. There's no skipping steps.
No, and even if,
there's no skipping steps.
No.
Yeah. Everyone will be invited down into their yin. And that's something I'm even seeing in some of the men in my life this year, is they've been doing psychotherapy for 20 years. And just this year, it's gotten so bad that they've had to ask, female therapists to start doing embodiment practices, to start doing, cranial sacral, to start getting into their bodies. That for both men and women, we can't go straight from all of these different ways, ascension-based ways of getting up and out of our bodies, straight into a place of unity of consciousness where everything is aligned. We have to actually drop down into our basements. And in my view, the quickest way to do that is to start by transcending the right-wrong world, where you see things as right and wrong. You can start to see things as immature and mature. So don't judge what other people are doing. We're all just learning how to mature. We're learning more and more holy ways of being. And that all surrounds, in my view, our definitions of love. So when I can step into my life and say, how is my definition of love of self different than God's definition or the universe's definition? Within 48 hours, I will have a situation triggered coming into my life that will trigger the hell out of me, that will leave me frustrated, that will leave me. And if I stay in the frustration and I don't feel fully what this is bringing to me, I will lose the lesson. But if I can actually recognize that anger is rooted in a false belief about love, a false belief about what it means to love myself or to love others, and it's all rooted in a definition that's really not God's definition. When I can actually start to become curious about my definitions of love, I can really progress, because I can release that definition and say, I'm trying to give a good example. Let's say I am afraid of, this is something I'm working on in my marriage right now, taking another layer out, is I am afraid of a man's frustration or anger. And so because I'm afraid of it, sometimes I don't, I'm not afraid of it in some circles, but I am afraid of it in other circles. So sometimes I just accept it and allow the projection, and kind of will dance around a man's anger, and I'll placate a man's anger. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I've now stepped into another place. I've peeled back another layer recently, where I have in my soul, I've said, I'm no longer willing to entertain that equation, the equation where Caroline dances around a man's anger and makes it all okay. Because what happens when you dance around a man's frustration or anger for years and years and years? What happens? Well, that equation, that man doesn't progress either, right? Because that man is so used to having a woman dance around and make everything okay, right? So what happens when we uncouple from that? A lot of things are triggered. But in that uncoupling from that equation, both the male and the female, learn so many beautiful things about how to interact. And when they can connect in ways that were impossible under other equations. Were impossible when we're dealing with each other in ways that are showing our wounds.
Yeah. And I think that there's an invitation, a greater invitation to, again, that whole, I'm just a huge proponent of people not spiritually bypassing to make it okay and to keep the peace. We do that in all these structures, right? And the feminine is invitational, it's open, and it's like, hey, how do we collaborate? I will tell you why, and I know you know this, but, and then we'll kind of have to wrap up, because I just looked at the time. I'm like, oh boy, we're at an hour. So I think that the reason so many of our millennials and young adults and Generation Zers are really disillusioned with these structures, I would say, let's just say religion, for example, there's just an exit, there's just an en masse exiting of most religions, is because they want the collaboration. They don't want an ascension model. They don't want a hierarchy. They want, how can I contribute? How can you include me and my voice? And, how can we all sit at the table together and sup together, if you will, and how can we collaborate?
Yeah,
so I think that dynamic plays out in so many scenarios, but it's
and I think as we have now ascended and we've created all these structures, we're really having, and especially in the technology space, that's a whole nother podcast, what the technology frontier has done, because it's basically yang-based energy unchecked. The yin is not in that space at all. And so I think we're having a crisis of connection.
Yes.
And that's what the yin is so beautiful at. The yin is actually all about connection, all about bringing that male energy down into the heart of the beating heart of the world. Mm-hmm. We have this beautiful beating heart that if we were to just honor it and to live in it and to amplify all of the beautiful, this is what I see in women's retreats when I do sand tray and women's retreats. Women's wisdom and women's power is so great and so beautiful, but it's been so undervalued. And part of it is just awakening to how powerful we really are, and to stepping out into our family, stepping out into the public square with a beautiful truth. It doesn't need to be a wounded feminine call out cancel culture that in a shrill voice screams at the wounded masculine. It means taking the man beside you and dancing your way into some new steps together. It means dancing your way into a new energetic equation that makes him feel alive and connected in a way that he has been yearning for. Mm-hmm. How do you think the pornography industry is what it is?
They're just searching for a connection.
They're searching
to the feminine,
for a connection to the feminine in a way that if we were to rise up and recognize it, our whole world would change. Because men want what we have. They just don't know it.
Right.
And I'm not talking about sexually.
Yeah,
I'm talking about in all different ways.
Yeah, they want to integrate that within ourselves. When I'm a huge kind of like archetypal studies, Joseph Campbell, Hero's Journey / Maureen Murdoch, Heroine's Journey. And the very last piece to the heroine's journey is the integration of the sacred masculine and feminine within yourself. Marriage. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're
I'm
so sorry, but I'm going to have to wrap this up.
That's
I could keep talking. So where can people find you, Caroline? You've got a great Facebook page.
Yeah, I think Caroline Crockett Brock on Facebook. I write there pretty regularly. I'm in the middle of starting a book, in the beginning phases of it. And then I have a private practice here in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So I haven't yet started a website. I'll see how that's going to grow organically. I'm right now, I'm on Facebook. I'm just dancing into this public space in whatever way I'm called to in the moment.
Yeah, and just sharing some beautiful yin messaging on Facebook, which is nice to see.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for your time. This has been amazing. Lots to unpack here. Lots to go back and process.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Wow, so I thought that was a super cool exploration of how to harness these powers within us. And one of my favorite parts of what Caroline talked about is this whole scaffolding to God thing, and how we try to create all this structure without really honoring that feminine that already lives there and moves and breathes and flows within us, that doesn't necessarily need that structure, if you will. It just is. It's just a being and having that direct connection to God. You can find Caroline on her Facebook page at Caroline Crockett Brock. Just see some of the really cool things that she posts. I mean, just so thoughtful and insightful and conscious, and I just love it. And also go to my website, cherieburton.com, and grab that free multisensory healing kit. It's always available for you there. Just a fun lookbook of ways that you can self-nurture. So have a glorious week, and we'll talk to you next time on Women Seeking Wholeness.